welcome to Mega Wellness Summit. I'm your host, Nikki Jensen. So today's conversation will definitely be enlightening, especially for me, because fitness is something I struggle with, and I don't know about you, but I absolutely hate to exercise. You know, lots of people love it. I live in Southern California, and there's lots of people that are running on the beach and, you know, totally jogging it out and biking and exercising, and I love it. But that's not me. I'm really stoked to be talking to Dr. Jamie Richards. He's an expert on fitness, getting healthy, and he believes that every human being is designed to be extraordinary. Dr. Jamie is a chiropractor who is taking a different approach with healing our body and our health. He is also very busy with his popular podcast, Life by Design, being a new daddy and a dedicated husband. Welcome, Dr. Jamie Richards. How the heck are you? Thank you so much for being on the summit.
Nikki, I am fabulous, and I'm very excited to be on the summit. As I said in the pre-interview, really excited that, you know, when you put together this project, that our name came up, and you've asked me to be on the summit and be a part of it. And again, congrats to you for doing something so huge and taking on such a massive undertaking, a massive project. I have a good idea of what it takes to run something like this and make it really successful. So I'm happy to help in any way, and congrats to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's all about changing lives, and that's something that you're doing right now. And you're taking fitness and you're putting a different spin on things, which I absolutely love. So, you know, as I just said, I hate to exercise. I love yoga, right? Don't get me wrong. I love yoga. I sort of love Pilates, but I hate to get my heart rate going because I just feel like a complete, I don't know, failure's the word, but I can't really see it through. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it totally makes sense. I mean, these are things that we hear from people all the time. You're not alone, that's for sure.
Oh, really? Oh, good.
Oh, my gosh. Thousands and tens of thousands of people, Nikki, who, you know, have a hard time exercising. And I think it's interesting that, you know, if you ask the general person and did an interview or a survey with people, I don't think people, you know, don't think that exercise is important. And a lot of times in the health field, people have this, especially health providers, we think, well, do they understand that exercise is important? People understand. It's like smoking. People know it's not good for you, but there's oftentimes emotional reasons why people either do something or don't do something. And, you know, that's really the focus of our interview today is, you know, how do we handle the emotional aspect of fitness and weight loss and all these things that people, they want to do, they know they should do. And, you know, I think we get hung up on, you know, the action step to do them, but we're not really clear on, you know, what it is that's actually holding us back. And the truth is it's not usually what to do. It's something else that's deeper that's holding us back from getting it done.
I love that. I love to go deeper because that's the core of our beingness. And so if you can psychologize why I hate to exercise, I would love to hear what you have to say.
Well, this could be a great interview. It could be we could have you exercising by the end of the episode. That would be
great. Cool. Yeah, I love that.
Well, you know, and again, like I said in the beginning, there's a ton of people who are in the same situation that you are, and you know, as we go through this, there's probably people listening in who are either struggling with exercise like you, they hate to exercise, they feel like a failure, they're maybe struggling with weight loss. I think a lot of people who are listening are probably tired of the perception that, you know, weight loss is equivalent to health in the sense that, you know, there's something more than just losing weight or going to the gym because we're supposed to go to the gym. I think there's a lot of people that are being held back, but they're not really sure what it is. And you know what? There's a whole pile of people who are doing the right stuff, but, you know, they're probably listening to your Mega Summit because that's kind of how they are. They just want to know more, right? They want to know more of these fundamental pieces. So, you know, I always say, where do you start? Because that really is the question. You know, where do you get started in this, and how do we kind of dig through maybe what some of the issues are that are holding you back and why you hate it? And the one place that I always like to start, you know, kind of the first things first, is identifying somebody's values. So when we deal with the, you know, the emotional component of fitness and health, the first thing I ask people is, you know, what are your values? So, Nikki, do you know what your values are? Have you ever stopped to think about that? Have you ever defined them? Have you ever, you know, kind of given some thought to what they are?
Well, I value nutrition greatly. And so I make sure that every single thing that goes into my body is going to fuel it and not create inflammation or havoc on my system. And I know that I have a very weak, it can be a weak system, but I try to strengthen that through what I put in.
So why is it that you value nutrition? Do you know? What is it that you feel like you get out of nutrition, makes a big impact for you?
So we've turned the interview over to me. This is very interesting. So I think for me why I value nutrition is
what do you get out of it? You start doing all this stuff. What does it give you that you're getting by doing it so well?
Okay, so I have a issue with fainting, and when I was younger I had seizures, and I also have an intolerance to gluten. So it's actually imperative that I eat well, or else I'll be sick.
Oh, so that's a pretty huge deal for you.
Yeah, I almost have to do it because when I don't, I'm sick. So I'd rather be healthy and vibrant and feel really good and have good energy rather than being sick, because sick energy is, not good. I mean, you're not living with sick energy.
So obviously, being that, family is a value for you, the nutrition part for you probably has a huge impact on making sure that you take care of your family. You can, enjoy your family life so much more. So the same can be true, for example, with exercise. So when it comes to values, let me just give you a little background. A value is something that we want to attain or maintain. Okay? So, for example, health can be a value for some people. Family, as you said, financial abundance, our children, productive achievement. Some people it's volunteerism, community service. Knowing what our values are really, really important in terms of the first step, because if we don't understand what our values are, then we're not going to understand how to act in accordance with those values. So what I end up seeing a lot with people is they don't know what their values are, and because they don't know what their values are, all the things they're doing are typically a product of what they think they're supposed to do, right? What media has told them to do, how they're supposed to eat, how they're supposed to exercise, and they're not really doing it for themselves. So, when we talk about the emotional aspects of weight loss and fitness, I think one of the really key components to talk about is this idea that, emotions, most people think emotions are primary, right? If they feel bad, they try and do something to make them not feel bad. If they feel good, they try and do more of the same thing to make them feel good. But really, emotions, and here's how I want people who are listening to think about emotions. Emotions really are a barometer for how closely we are aligned with what our values are. Okay, so if you know what your values are, and if you feel good about the way you're living, you're probably living and acting pretty much in accordance with what your values are. If you're not, you're going to feel really bad about yourself, and therein lies the challenge. Therein lies the good stuff that you talked about before, where people are, knocking themselves down. They're feeling terrible about, what they're doing or what they're not doing. And if you take it all the way back and peel back the layers, it's most likely because they're getting to this point where they're realizing that they're not living in accordance with the things that they value most. So for you, you talk about nutrition, but really nutrition, although it may be a value, a bigger value for you is probably family, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So all you really have to do is figure out a way to link, say, exercise to family. So, for example, if you know that if you don't exercise, how well do you think you'd be able to take care of your family?
I don't exercise, but I still kind of take care of my family.
So
I do take care of my family, not kind of.
Imagine how well you would take care of your family if you actually were more fit, if you exercised regularly. Do you think that would have an impact on the quality of life and your family life?
Yeah, and that's a great point, because when I do exercise, let's say when I do yoga or Pilates or even go out for a walk, I do feel like I just gave myself a gift.
Right.
And so I'm able to give to my children, and that's, you hit it right on the head. So I feel like I'm able to give my children a gift or a better piece of me because I feel good. Is that where you're going with this? Because I just had an aha moment.
That's exactly where I'm going with that. So, understanding our values are the centerpiece of, for us, what we call the Think by Design component of health. So, to me, there's a few of them. There's values. So once you understand your values, so for example, you just had this moment where you realize that, man, if I just figured out how to exercise in a way that I was happy doing, I would actually be able to give more to my children, and then, I'm going to be more fulfilled in my family relationships, and it's going to have this huge, domino effect. So the next step for you then would be to start to create a vision around what that could look like. So where most people are, they have this challenge, let's say exercise in your example, and what they do is they kind of repeat this mental cycle over and over again about how much they hate it and how much they don't want to do it, and what they really need to be doing is spending more time connecting it to the thing that they value most. So sitting down and creating a vision really is one of the most important things that people can do. To be honest, it's one of my absolute favorite things, and it's one of those pieces of the Think by Design component that probably has had the biggest impact in my life. So, I'm a real dreamer. I'm really good at starting projects and starting things. I'm not so good at always finishing them, which is why I have a great team around me. But for us in our life, so for you, for example, you could, go get a coffee or tea and block out an hour or two and find a place where, you really enjoy being, whether it's a coffee shop or your backyard, and get out a journal and sit there and literally start creating a vision. And you could do this for your whole life, but for this topic specifically, you could just map out a vision for what it would be like if you started to exercise in some way, if you started adding fitness into your life. How would that affect your kids? And then start to really snowball that. So think about it, Nikki. How old are your kids?
9 and 4.
Okay, so 9 and 4. I mean, there's so many components of this that are exciting to me. Number one, what do you think your children would see from you if you were exercising and more fit on a regular basis? Do you think that they would try and model that behavior? Would that be a good thing for them to see?
Yeah, because they'll see me. I'm outdoors. I'm enjoying the sunshine and the greenery and getting in good oxygen rather than being inside and being in front of a TV or, being on tablets and phones and, yeah.
Exactly. You would set a great example for them, and I'm passionate about role modeling as adults. So I just had my first child. We just had a baby girl.
Congratulations.
Yes, we're really, really excited. We had a home birth. It was amazing. It was beautiful. She's had, no interventions along the way. All the steps that I talk about with people we've implemented. She's, been breastfeeding. We co-sleep. She's had no chemicals in her body whatsoever. I've checked the structure of her spine and nervous system. She gets lots of love. So I'm excited to role model for her and implement in her life exactly what I would want other people to see and how I want them to live their life. And so I look at myself today. So I'm 39 years old, and I think back and I say, my parents probably wanted the best for me. And, you or me probably aren't the best example of this, but take someone who maybe isn't healthy. They're not living a life that is extraordinary, to use our language, and, they're trying to get their kids to be healthier. And I always say to them, I say, it's interesting. I bet you your parents wanted you to be healthy when you were growing up, and they just kept telling you and wishing, and here you are, the same age as your parents were when they were wishing, and you're still just wishing that your children are going to grow up and be healthy. And they're missing the point that the way children grow up and be well is they role model what their parents are doing. So number one, in creating your vision, you can start to snowball the effect mentally. What would it be like for my 9-year-old, my 4-year-old, if they saw me exercising on a regular basis?
Right.
That would be amazing. And
yeah,
then fast forward that, Nikki, fast forward that 25 years, right? What would it be like if they saw you exercising and living a certain life? So they took that on for themselves, all right? That means they had more energy, they were more fit, they were sick less often, they had better mental focus, their IQ increased, they started fulfilling their potential, right? They lived a better life, they had their own children, and now they get to role model for their children. So now you're talking about 2 generations, and then eventually 3 and on and on and on. And guess where it all started? It started with you making the decision that your family was important enough and that you were important enough to show them how you wanted them to live their life.
Amen. I love it.
So, vision.
I'm inspired.
Good. So now you already have an action step, Nikki. You're going to go create a vision. So this week,
you're
going to follow. I'm going to follow up with you actually and make sure you did this. So I'm telling the truth. You're getting a message from me, okay? The second thing that we would need to deal with, or third, we talked about values. We talked about a vision. Probably the biggest piece of this, and that you mentioned it earlier, and that's self-esteem. And one of my favorite authors is Nathaniel Branden. He just passed away, and he really was the father of self-esteem. And, he said that so many illnesses and mental states and problems that people experience in their life, at least in some part, there was a deficiency in self-esteem.
Yeah.
And, he defined self-esteem as the disposition to experience oneself as competent to cope with the basic challenges of life and as worthy of happiness, kind of like loving oneself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this could be a 5-hour call if we really dug into self-esteem. But here's the point. At the core of this are what Nathaniel Brennan called the 6 pillars. And I want to try and relate these to the emotional aspects of fitness and weight loss that we're talking about today. So he talked about, number 1, living consciously. This is what you see. It's part of why you decided to do the summit, was you saw, and tell me if I'm right or wrong here, you saw thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands living completely unconsciously, putting things in their body, acting in ways that didn't seem to make sense, not because they didn't know better, but because they weren't paying attention. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you took action on that. You saw that. So where do we start? Well, we talked about sitting down and creating a vision. Part of that is this living consciously pillar that Nathaniel Brennan talks about. So when it comes to, say, fitness or weight loss, take a look at what you're currently doing. One of the best exercises I could ever give somebody is to map out, what they spend most of their time doing. So, for example, somebody might say, well, I value exercise. And I get this in my practice all the time. Ask them, what's one of your top values? And they say, oh, well, it's exercise or health. I say, great. Tell me what things you do for health right now. And the blank stare goes over their face. They're not doing anything for their health, even though they're telling themselves that being healthy is a really, really high value for them. So they're not living consciously. So the first thing we need to do is sit down and say, listen, I need to be honest with myself. Am I actually doing what I need to be doing in order to achieve the results that I'd like to achieve? The second pillar here is self-acceptance. So, this is kind of accepting. Okay, I want to be healthy. I want to go to the gym. I want to be fit. But you know what? I'm not. We're lying to ourselves. And you probably see this in some of the people that you work with or that interact with you. They really do want to get healthy, but they haven't accepted the fact that they're not actually doing what it takes to be well. And so they kind of repeat the cycle over and over and over. And maybe if we're using you as an example, have you ever felt like, you were exercising? I'm going to the gym. I really am exercising. And then you actually took the time to look back and maybe look at your schedule over the last month, and you realize, oh my gosh, actually I haven't even gone to the gym. I've gone 3 times in the last month.
Oh, I haven't gone in probably 2 to 3 months, and which is terrible. I try to keep moving and not sit so much, but because I've been so busy, I literally always put exercise as the very last priority.
Right. This is great because we're getting into some good stuff here. This goes back because really you're the person listening to the Mega Wellness Summit, right? There's probably people just like you saying the same thing that you're saying, and especially I see it tons with moms who have kids. And one of my values and something that I'm very determined about, and hopefully people catch on with this, is that your life is your highest value. I mean, this is totally cliche, but it's why they say put the oxygen mask on first. You can't help your kids unless you're doing what it takes. And so here's what we end up perpetuating. And this is where some of these emotional wounds and scars start to really damage our kids in ways that we don't really recognize, is that mothers in general, and, I mean this in the nicest way, but they tend to sacrifice themselves. They give up on something that's important to them because they believe that they're, by doing that, giving their child something that's of benefit. And really what's happening is the opposite. By sacrificing something that you think is important for your children, you're not actually giving to them. You're actually robbing them of all the things we talked about, them seeing you, living consciously, accepting yourself, and taking responsibility for your life. What you're teaching them is to do the same thing, and it's why most likely, and I don't know your whole story, but I'm guessing you are probably a great mom, and you probably act in the same way that, say, your mom or your grandmother did, right? You kind of just do what they did and be an awesome mom, but in that, you put yourself to the side, and you end up sacrificing yourself, which long-term has such a massive negative effect. And here's the part. Do you have a boy or a girl?
Both.
Both.
One of each.
The part that I want you to see, and, I hope this really strikes you in a good way, your daughter, there's nothing that says that she's not going to be the same that you are, at your age. She's going to be going through the exact same thing because she's seeing you do it. And the only way she's going to break that is if either you change it and become self-responsible, which is the third pillar of self-esteem. So taking ownership basically over your actions and recognizing that, when you say, well, I don't have time, or whatever the excuse is, it's saying, no, you know what? If this is a value for me and my children are a value for me, then I need to figure out how to make this happen. And then it's not a slap yourself on the wrist, look in the mirror, and say bad things about yourself, but it's being responsible about that. And by doing this stuff, and I'm not saying it's easy, by the way, what I'm saying is you are doing probably the most important job you could do for your children, and that's you are showing them how to overcome something that's cyclical in most people's families. So you're taking this responsibility. And the fourth pillar, which is what you're doing by running the Mega Summit, is you're self-assertive. You're seeing a need that needs to happen either in your life or in other people's lives, and you're saying, screw it. I'm jumping in. I'm doing this because this is an extension of something that I value very highly. If you have the same amount of assertiveness as you do for the Mega Wellness Summit as you do, say, for exercise, right? Could you imagine how much exercise you'd get done?
Yeah, definitely.
You got it. So it's the same thing. You just have to get back to that core and figure out what the value is that is motivating enough for you, and maybe it's your children, maybe it's yourself, whatever it is. And then when you start to map this process out, you recognize that every time you don't exercise, every time you don't go to the gym or do yoga or whatever you've set out to do, you are actually slowly and incrementally robbing yourself of your self-esteem, because you're saying to yourself, I value health, I value my children. And every time you don't follow through with the action that matches up with that, you eat away a little bit at the self-esteem, and it becomes this ongoing cycle to the point where people get so deep into it, it gets really, really hard to get out of it.
Right.
So does that make sense? Does that seem to fit for you and lots of people that you deal with?
Oh, yes. And I know that this has been the cycle for even my mom, too. Make sure that you put yourself last and everybody else comes first. Everybody else. So my husband comes first and his agenda, my kids and their agenda comes first, and then if there's time left for me, but what you're saying is that I need to set the example that my life is just as important as everybody else's, which sets self-esteem example for my children, and especially my daughter, to say, well, I am important, and so I need to fulfill my needs first.
Well, especially in motherhood, I think that, it's kind of a no-no to talk about this idea of, selfishness. And, in different circles, I like the idea of rational self-interest. And Ayn Rand, people probably read Atlas Shrugged or The Fountainhead. I'm a definite fan of her philosophies in some ways. And, she talks about rational self-interest and this idea that, it's okay to value ourselves very highly and live in accordance with that value. So for me, my values are myself, my family, my purpose, and my work, and the things that I do. And so I just don't do a lot of superlative things. Like, I don't do a lot of stuff outside of those values because I don't have time to do those things. So, the power of knowing what your values are, it acts as really a scale for you. When someone says, hey, Nikki, if you guys want to come and be a part of, this event, well, you can look at your values list and say, you know what, that doesn't really match up with my values. I'm not going to put the time and energy into this. But someone else, wants to participate in a talk or the summit, or maybe your children, participate in a sporting event. You're like, I'm there. I'll do whatever I have to do to get there. So the same kind of assertiveness that you have with everybody else in your life, you can just start having with yourself and the things that you value most.
Absolutely.
So
I love that.
The fifth pillar, if we'll complete these since we're deep into them here, is living purposefully. And you have to go in this order when you're working through the 6 pillars of self-esteem. And the fifth pillar is living purposefully. And here's the point, is once you start to build this foundation where you know what your values are, you start to become conscious, so you're creating a vision for yourself. You are starting to accept, what you have been doing and haven't been doing, and you're not trying to, ignore reality and pretend like, well, I don't know why I'm not getting these health results, when really you know exactly why you're not, because you're not doing what it takes to actually do them. And then you take self-responsibility, you start to become self-assertive, which is really when you start to take action. And then this fifth pillar is about living purposefully. So it means, formulating the goals that you're going to be implementing and tying them around a why. And, probably lots of people in the summit are going to talk about Simon Sinek's work in terms of start with why. And, our why at Life by Design, and you started off the call with it, was that, we truly believe that the natural default state for the human body is extraordinary. That the point is the body's built to be incredible. So that really is part of our purpose and our why, and all the things that we do from that. So the action steps we encourage people to do, how we advise people, the training, the structural care that we deliver, all those pieces, they're all an extension of our why. So if you know what your why is, and this is something that can take a little bit of time, it's not something that typically kind of pops in your mind overnight. If you can really start to uncover what that is, then that starts to give you the anchor. So now you have the value. My kids are a value. My life's a value. My health's a value. And then you start to come up with a purpose. So, for example, the Mega Wellness Summit could be a big part of your purpose, right? I mean, from talking to you, it sounds like it's becoming a part of your purpose.
Absolutely.
And how does it make you feel when you actually start to do the work that surrounds the summit?
Well, first of all, I set intentions, and I feel that, my purpose in life is helping others open up their mind and their hearts to seeing a new way of living and being, because it changed my life. Nutrition changed my life. So I think that it opens up a new door of possibilities, not just even health-wise, but just a door of possibilities in all aspects of life.
Right.
So
now I want you to simply connect that purpose to adding fitness and exercise into your life. Hands down, it will be absolutely impossible for you to fulfill the full potential of this purpose if you are not fit, healthy, strong, and all those things that come along with regular exercise. So once you make that connection and you throw in the kids' connection to that, and you understand that your two values will never be fully expressed and your purpose will never be fully expressed if you don't exercise, from this moment on, you're gonna wake up every day and say, "Holy cow! If I don't make it to my fitness class today, or I don't get to the gym today, I am not going to feel good about myself." And so you're going to start to do it, and you're going to start to gain that momentum. So it really is about getting some velocity going in the beginning, right? You do all this stuff we're talking about today. For those people listening in, this is the hard work, right? This is the sit down. I mean, people think going to the gym is the hard work. It's not. That's the easy work. The hard work is dealing with the emotional restrictions that people have that hold them back from being healthy. Once you've cleared those out and you have a clearer idea of what your values are and you're connected to, what you need to do and you're taking action, the action steps are really easy and simple. And what happens is you start to gain momentum, right? And that velocity just increases and increases. And you're probably a good example. Anytime, if you look back in your life, once you've implemented, say, a regular exercise or fitness routine, it's probably been pretty tough to stop you. But once you stop doing it, it's tough to get back on track, correct?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That's the crux right there, is for those people who are listening in, or they're just stuck, you don't necessarily start with the physical aspect. And I'm not saying you shouldn't try and get to the gym or you shouldn't go for a walk or do something physical, but really where you have to start with is the psychological aspect. You have to mentally be solid, and you have to have all these pillars fulfilled. You have to have your vision mapped out. You have to have, a clear purpose on what you're trying to do. The final piece of all of this is the action steps. And it's funny, when it comes to fitness, especially in weight loss, people are really caught up in the action steps. What diet should I follow? What macronutrient intake do I need? How much protein? What vitamins? So they're really concerned about the what to do. The what to do is easy. I can give you a PDF list and hand it to you and say, do this. But if you haven't dealt with the psychological aspects of fitness and health and just, taking care of yourself and putting yourself as a high value, you're generally going to fail. You're not going to be successful. So, we're kind of going about it in a backwards way. We need to start at the bottom, which is the psychology, and dealing with our issues there, building up from that, and then, starting to refine the actual action steps.
And I love your theory because it's not about calories in and calories out. This is a whole new way of looking at designing your life.
Yes.
And a lot of people are stuck on the notion of calories. Really, we're still there. That you have to restrict your calories in order to lose weight, and you have to exercise your butt off in order to lose weight, and you have to not eat fat, right? Stay away, because fat is still bad in a lot of people's minds. What is your take on that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I see this all the time, and so do you, and that's why you're asking the question. And I think it goes back to, asking yourself, is weight loss the actual goal we're looking for? Right? Is that the actual goal we're trying to set? Because if weight loss truly is the goal, let's say someone is an athlete and they have to cut weight to make an event, I get it. In their case, weight loss is their goal.
Right.
And in order to do that, they may have to do some extreme things like restrict calories, get on a bike and cycle like crazy. And we see all the things that athletes do, whether it's in wrestling or MMA or boxing, in order to cut weight and kind of make their class. In the short term, it's probably not massively damaging as long as it's not something that's, repeated on a hyper-consistent basis. But most people looking at weight loss in that way as their only goal and they're just like anything they can do to lose weight, that's going to be super damaging physiologically and, more importantly, psychologically. So, it's funny because what most people really want is, they don't want to change. They want to be the same person, meaning they want to have the same poor self-esteem, the same values, the same unhappy life, the same habits, have the same people around them, but they want to do it all but only lighter.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
They think that they can be the same person but lighter, and that's going to make them happy. So I think the first step is in starting to look at the goal itself. And, we kind of alluded to this. And, the question that I ask our listeners is creating health different from just losing weight? You know what I'm saying? They're not necessarily the same thing.
Right.
That's the core and the key of the Life by Design model is starting to shift people's mindset. And I'm not saying there's absolutely a time and place for people just trying to lose weight. I get it, and there's some extreme things people can do. But what I'm talking about is how do we create health? And as we're creating health, one of the byproducts may be losing weight. But here's the thing. As you create health, one of the byproducts might be gaining weight. So if we use, for example, a definition of health, and I'm going to give people a totally different definition because most people's definition of health usually revolves around not being sick, right?
Right.
I ask somebody, are you healthy? They say yes. And I started seeing this in my practice. I'd say, are you healthy? They'd say yes, and I'd see a list of medications and a list of all these secondary conditions that people had.
Great point.
I'm like, what makes you think that you're healthy? And they'd say, well, I don't have cancer, or, I'm not going to die this week. So I had to reframe this idea of health and turn it into, what real health actually is from a scientific level, normal cellular function. It literally is the cells of our body working the way they're supposed to. And the outcome of that, and this is what really gets me super stoked and excited, is the outcome of cellular function is adaptability, right? It's our body adapting to the environment. So really all health is creating a body that can adapt to the environment that it's in. And the better it can adapt, the better it can change and can be modified and can, basically be productive in whatever situation we put it in. So, we keep going back along these steps, and it comes back to this really cool point that I'm going to bring up, and I know you're going to have a question about this. I'm just going to go right to it. When it gets to this idea of what creates health, this was the point I made earlier. Health is the normal state of the body. Health is the normal. You say, how do we get healthy? You don't get healthy. You were already designed to be healthy, but what you've done is you've either stopped your body from getting something that it needed, or you've increased the toxic load of your body in a way that it can no longer produce normal cellular function. So how do we get healthy? It's very simple, actually. We go back and we peel the onion way back and we ask the simplest question you can ask. What are the requirements of the cells of the body in order to work normally? And it's actually quite simple. I mean, there's probably hundreds of them, but we're going to pare it down to just some really simple ones. Fuel, right? I think everybody would agree the cells need certain fuels.
Yep.
Movement, right? The body needs movement. you can definitely make the case there's a psychological requirement to normal, healthy function in the body. And the one that I deal with every day, and it's so interesting because it's such a shift from what people are used to. You know, most people hear about, say, traditional chiropractic, and they think aches and pains and moving the spine and so on. I totally get it. And there's a great place for that. But there's this whole other shift that we look at. I call it life by design chiropractic, where I'm just looking at the structure and the neurology. So the body's cells need normal input and output. They need normal neurological function. So here's the end game. If you were to just look at the foundational things, movement, food, psychology, and neurology, and build a lifestyle around those four things, and I'm not saying you don't need water and sleep and all these other things, but if people just did those four foundational requirements and had the strategies to make sure all of them got done, and then they did it every day forever, or I love to say rinse and repeat, and do it forever. If people did that, I'm telling you, Nikki, they would be blown away by the amount of health their body could create. I mean, there's a whole list of what I call secondary problems or secondary issues. And it's interesting because all these symptoms, as most people call them, whether it's, foggy thinking or, digestive issues or immobility or inflammation, infertility, Crohn's, colitis, all the stuff that we talk about. Here's, I think, one of the big problems in the natural health movement is that we're still really focused on the conditions. We're still really focused on all these secondary problems that people have. What we really need to do is take a step back and go and address the primary situations. So we need to ask ourselves, like I said, what are the requirements for health, and start living those. I mean, there's a time and a place to address all the secondary issues, but what I tend to find is when people do those four things, so when they fuel their body properly and they fulfill those requirements, and for me, the way I teach it, the requirements are protein, fat, and micronutrients. So if they, use strategies to make sure they're getting the right amount of protein from the best sources, the best amount and the right amount of micronutrients and the best fat sources. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have carbohydrates. I think we should tailor them to our exercise intake and so on. And some people are more adaptable, and, I mean, that's a whole other probably teleseminar. But the point is, if they just ask themselves, what do we need, and started to live in accordance with that, what we tend to see is a lot of those secondary problems, they tend to disappear without ever trying to address them specifically.
What's the difference between a micronutrient and a macronutrient?
They're the ones that people think about when they think about carbohydrates, fat, and protein. So those are the macronutrients for the body. And when it comes to the needs of every cell, the cells need fat and protein as its main primary requirements. Now, as I said, does the body work better with some carbohydrate? Yes. But there can be some conversion of some of the other macronutrients into carbohydrate. So that's why I say it's not necessarily an essential, but I'm not saying don't consume them. The consumption of carbohydrates from, what I would consider safe starches and vegetables and fruits should come, in a way that matches up with what our exercise level is. So if someone's exercising a lot, then they're going to have a greater need for carbohydrate intake from those good sources. If they're exercising less, then they're probably going to have less of a need. And there's some differences based on, cultural adaptation and so on. But, those are the big pieces. Those are kind of, you ever heard of Stephen Covey's rocks and sand analogy?
No, I don't think I have.
So he talks about, at a lot of his seminars when he was alive, he said, imagine a jar, and, you have rocks and pebbles and sand. And what most people do, is
I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay.
You got it. So they put the sand in first, and then the pebbles, and they try and jam the rocks in. And that really is probably one of the best analogies I've seen for how people live their life in terms of trying to be healthy, right? It's, how much vitamin B12 do I need? How much, omega-27 should I get? And they're all concerned with these little tiny, pebbles of sand. When I ask them, are you exercising? No. Are you eating enough protein? No. Do you eat fat? No. Do you, have you ever had your structure checked? No. Do you like your life? No. I mean, these are the rocks. And until you get those addressed, spending time on the sand ends up being a waste and actually slows down the entire health restoration process. Interesting.
Yes.
And people will send questions and, what do you think about, coenzyme Q10? What do you think about, all these different vitamins? What do you think about, mobility work? And all that stuff is great. And I think it's wonderful. But it's not as important as the big rocks. And I just find across the board, most of the population is spending way too much time either trying to treat their secondary conditions through some type of natural health intervention, whether it's supplements or some type of therapy, and they're not spending enough time putting in the rocks. Right? Go to the gym and exercise.
Right.
Go for a walk every day. Write down your vision like we talked about before. Develop your values. Go to a Life by Design chiropractor. Get your structure checked. Make sure your neurology is healthy. Eat some more protein. Eat fat.
What I see a lot from people is they don't want to change, right? They don't want to change necessarily what they're eating because they're completely addicted to food, especially, breads, and they love their breads and they love their carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had a girl cry when I said, well, how do you feel about just eliminating wheat for 6 weeks? She cried just on the sheer notion of the thought of it.
I believe it.
She later on went to do it and was successful and felt great and lost weight. But, we would rather work our tail off at the gym than change the way that we're eating.
Yes, there is a whole psychological component to food. And one of the first things we ask people when they're working with us at Life by Design, we have a whole kind of other wing that deals with all this, and it's our Eat by Design coaches. And one of the things the coaches, when they're working with the clients, one of the things they ask is, what's your relationship with food? And, in discussions with them, they hear the most incredible things. People do have a psychological attachment to certain foods, and there's all different reasons. And a lot of the stuff we talked about earlier would be really, really valuable for someone in that situation. Going back to, values. So let's say the person didn't want to give up bread, but one of their high values they started to realize was, in your case it was children, but maybe it is, living a long life. So maybe a value for them is longevity. If you can show them that there's a gap, if they don't eat the right food, that their life and their longevity is going to be affected, if that's a high enough value for them, then they start to see what we call a contradiction. So anytime there's a contradiction between something you value and the way you're living your life, as long as you're living consciously, right? If you're unconscious to it, you don't know what you don't know. But, as soon as you start to get conscious to something, and I'm guessing this is what you started to experience, right? I don't, if you went back 10 years or however many years it was when you started thinking differently, was there a moment when, one moment you never thought about something, and then the next moment someone introduced you to an idea and everything just started to change?
Yeah. It was actually my mom. So my mother was diagnosed with celiac disease, and when I was pregnant with my daughter, my second child, I got sick, and so I was vomiting, and it wasn't just normal, pregnancy sickness, okay? It was totally out of the blue, like for 2 days vomiting, totally sick. And so my mother said to me, maybe you should take a look at gluten being the cause for your sickness. Now, if I didn't open my heart and my eyes and my brain, I would have said, no, I'm going to poo-poo that because there's no connection between me being sick. I ate something bad. It's not the gluten. It's not what I ate, as far as ingredients-wise. It's probably a bacteria.
Right.
I could have done that. But what I did was I looked at my mother and I said, you know what? If this is important to you, Mom, this is important to me. So if you want me to try it, I'll give it a try.
Right.
So for 7 days, I eliminated gluten, and I felt amazing. I actually felt more of a connection between with me and the baby than I ever did. It was so weird. I felt like when I was eating bread, I just felt so bloated and just didn't feel very good. So on like the day 5 and 6, I felt really good. On day 8, I went back to eating gluten, and again, I got sick right away.
Right.
So that was the turning point for me, was my mother going, wake up, dude, it's time to be a mom and make sure that you're putting good nutrients into your body.
Right. And, Nikki, that's the first pillar we talked about. That's living consciously. Up to that point, you weren't conscious of the fact that this could have been a negative thing for your body, for yourself and for your child. And so you were, at least open to the idea, thought about it consciously, and it set forth a whole cascade of events that have changed your life. So you can start to see how these psychological components are at the core of making change, whether it's fitness or weight loss. And, of course, you have to understand some of the concepts we talked about earlier, that health is more than just being symptom-free, that, we should ask ourselves what are the requirements and start to build out our lifestyle from there. But we really need to dig in to our values, to developing our self-esteem, to creating a vision, to identifying our purpose, and to then mapping out the strategy and then creating a support system around us to, as I said, rinse and repeat on those actions. The cool part is, I think, for health, is that, you can't absolve yourself of the effects of reality. So you can't pretend that, gravity doesn't exist and jump off a building and think that you're not going to get injured or damaged, because gravity exists and you don't get to live a life that, gets to bypass that. So the same rules apply to health. There are literally rules to health. So when I talk about, the Life by Design requirements, what I've tried to do is identify what are the rules for the human body, both physiologically and psychologically, and then we teach people how to actually do those things and live them and, do them in a way that becomes easy so they can repeat them over and over and start to get the results.
I love it. I love all of it. This has been very powerful. Well, I'm sure not only for me, but for other people as well, because there's a lot of me's out there.
Yes, I absolutely believe that. And, I'm thankful to you for, being willing and open to share your own personal example, because I think that makes it more real for people, to go through and kind of talk through what you were going through and kind of get into some of those aha moments and deal with the psychology. So, good for you for doing that, because I think a lot of the people who follow you and are finding their way to the summit are probably going to be people who, are probably just like you with some of the same, situations and, challenges that you have. They're going through them too. So good for you, Nikki.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm really an open book, so it doesn't really bother me. I'm willing to say whatever.
Awesome.
So your website is lifebydesignApproved.com. Now, you're located in Canada.
Well, we're actually located all around the world, which is kind of the great thing about Life by Design. So I'm personally located in Canada, so I am enjoying the absolute freezing cold weather today on the coldest day of the year, but it's nice to get warmed up and have a conversation with you. Our office, so our home office is in Canada. We run what's called the Life by Design Center, so we have this awesome 10,000 square foot facility with a corrective care chiropractic office, a restaurant, and a full 5,000 square foot strength and conditioning center. So that's one location. We actually have 25 locations all around the world as we're continuing to grow our model and our vision. So we have offices in New Zealand, Australia, the United States, Canada. So, if they go to lifebydesignApproved.com, and if they go to /mega-wellness-summit, what they can do is there's actually some e-books there for them. So there's 4 free e-books that cover a lot of these topics. The Eat, Move, Think, and Power by Design books are there, so they can grab those. And then I know you're also going to share another link. And one of the things that's really cool is we actually got our Eat by Design coaching team to put together a cookbook. And so they're going to actually give 25% off to everybody listening, and they just can use the promo code MEGA between March 15th and the 21st, and you guys will all get 25% off. So I'm sure you'll share those, and people can use those resources.
I love that. I'm sure people are just going, yay!
This is how we eat. We eat what we call by design, and so the cookbook, goes through that and kind of shares it in detail. The actual e-books go into more detail, but we've been cooking out of the cookbook, my wife and I, and it's awesome. It really, really is. So.
Oh, I love it. So I'm not seeing a San Diego here.
No, we don't have a San Diego. Now, I do have some colleagues who are in the area in San Diego who, I really like, and they practice, I would say, in a very similar model to us, although they're not Life by Design offices yet. Maybe they will be. But, anybody who needs referrals to a Life by Design office, you can go to the lifebydesignApproved.com website, and there's actually a button that says Certified Offices, and you can actually see all the locations. And truthfully, if you don't see one in your area, just message me, and you'll see my email on there and contact me, and I'll do my best to find you somebody, and we can connect you that way.
In Canada and in Australia, you have Annapolis, Maryland. That's very cool. people are going to be excited about that one.
Yes.
And, Australia, all those Aussies out there are reaping all the benefits.
I had the pleasure of going to Australia last year for on a speaking tour and training and working with some of our offices. And, I'm looking forward to going back, that's for sure.
Awesome. Well, come to San Diego because it needs to happen here in California.
Okay, let's do it.
And we'll work on that. But thank you so much. I appreciate your energy. I appreciate you sharing your wealth of information with our listeners and with the world, and you are changing lives daily, so I appreciate it.
Well, and thanks to you, Nikki, for doing what you're doing and getting everybody together to have this conversation.
Absolutely.